Welcome back to the Running on Grass podcast. I am your co-host, Logan Pribano, here with Eamon O'Toole. How are we doing today, Eamon?
Doing great, Logan. How are things out in Nebraska?
We had a very nice 3 inches of rain last week when we were up in Wyoming visiting you guys, and it made it so that we will be closing the month of June with exactly average rainfall.
Wow, because you were so far behind. You were at D4, right?
Yeah, we were D3 for all of the spring, and it's going to take us out of it. We're still the year-to-date rainfall is still pretty low, but it sure changed everyone's spirits. Got the cover crop going, the corn's looking good, and the pastures are resilient, man. It's cool. It's cool to see the perennial grasslands really flex their resiliency throughout this. How are things in Wyoming?
Yeah, we had 5 days ago, we had 0.32 inches here at my house in Dixon, and then 0.42 up at our mountain ranch. So same thing, everything that we're so far behind on moisture. It's crazy, but we are in, it was enough to freshen things up and kind of keep things moving a little bit. We have our cows on the forest. We have our sheep on the trail, so they're heading to the forest with their lambs. We got them docked here, I guess, 20 days ago. So lambs have kind of had a nice time to rest, and they're good for trail and all of those things. So they're doing really good, and we're starting to put up a little bit of hay here at my house. We don't put up hay, but I've worked a relationship with my neighbor that he'll put it up and gets half the hay. So that works really well for both of us. And especially where we're in a, $300+ hay market and $400 alfalfa market. So you can tell how dry it is in the West when you start seeing hay prices get like that.
Yeah, that is insane. And hay just doesn't travel very well. I told you last winter I could buy all the hay I wanted for, and not maybe 10% crude protein, but we're looking at $1.10 delivered in. But it just doesn't travel well, does it?
No, and that's 300 out of the stack here. And we always had trouble when we were putting up a lot of hay getting it sold because we're 75 miles from the interstate. So you've got to get it out of our valley before it can even start going anywhere. And that's the tough part. So that was one of the decisions that also helped us, decide to not put up hay anymore. It was hard for us to get it sold and get it out of here.
Well, what do you want to hit on today? Then we can give a shout out to Eastco, our sponsor.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. We crossed 10,000 views or listens. So that's pretty cool. 90% average consumption. So people are listening to all or most of the podcast when they click it on.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool, actually. So shout out to our listeners. We're glad that you're here and can kind of keep you engaged.
Yeah, thank you for everybody, because Logan and I started this as something fun we wanted to try out, and it seems like people like hearing what we talk about. So that's exciting for us too.
Yep. And then I had a question from local kid Parker Dillon. Questions about just getting started. What should he invest in early on? I'm taking a sabbatical this winter, 3 and 3 months. Going to talk about how that works and what we'll be doing. And then 2 other things. We're going to talk about the grain aid request of $11 billion going to the farmers, or should I say through the farmers. And then want to hit on some grazing schools that are coming up with NGLC. So first, shout out to Eastco. Eastco is a rancher-owned, rancher-focused insurance agency specializing in PRF, LRP, and annual forage. The annual forage deadline is in 2 weeks, so if you're interested in that product, reach out to them sooner rather than later. Eastco doesn't do a ton of marketing, but because of its staff and they're listening to Running on Grass, it's exciting to be a podcast sponsor. Just as the topics covered are relevant and interesting to real boots-on-the-ground decision makers, the products Eastco offers provide tangible benefit to ranching operations across the U.S. Visit eastcogroup.com or email info@eastcogroup.com to learn more.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Eastco. You guys have been great.
Yeah, so
I'm starting to have those conversations, and I was joking with you on the phone, like Daryl Peel said about replacements. I'm thinking about doing an LRP now that things are back, and seems like everybody's settled down, or the market settled a little bit since we went into Iran.
Yeah, well, what was it doing today?
I haven't looked it up today. You're always pretty quick and already have those things up on your computer, so I rely on you for that kind of information.
Gosh, but with my delayed one, it's not loading yet, so I don't know what it is.
We'll kick it out here in a second when it pops up, but we talked about Parker Dillon's question of how a small guy gets going and get a herd going and early infrastructure and what kind of things that takes. And we've got a list here of things to talk about. And, what do we talk about? Do we talk about genetics? Do we talk about what kind of nutritional things we want to put into these, labor, capital? There's just a never ending list of things that is kind of always rolling through your mind of, do we need to get some better corrals for what we're going to do this year? Or, are we going to AI? Do we need to do anything special for that? And I think, why don't you give everyone a little story about TJ, because I think that's
Yeah,
a great example of how a young guy is doing it and being successful.
yeah. So Eamon and I were talking about this before the show, drinking some coffee, and I think TJ Ellicott, our cow boss, does it better than anyone. So he's a full time cow boss at Wineglass Ranch, and then he has his mom's place that he goes to most days at the end of the day, and then over the weekends. And so he's pulling the full time cow boss salary, and heading to his mom's place where he did heifer development last year, going to do it again this year. And just like Ammon and I, made some pretty good money on that deal last year. And so, if you're just getting started, having a full time job where you can, pay the bills, get that 12-month paycheck is critical. I'd also would invest in animals as much as I can, things that appreciate, not rust, rot, and depreciate. And I think that's really a great mix. And I would get to ranching for profit school as soon as possible, especially when you're just getting started out. It will provide the most leverage early on.
Yeah, it's really more of just a business school geared towards ranching or farming,
Hmm.
not not just, this is how we do it and this is the only way to do it. It gives you the outline, and then you just can cater it to however your operation runs as best as you can.
Yeah, and
And
Dallas he's redid it. It's a 5 day school now, and he's redone a bunch of the modules. And I need to retake it, but I think it's new and improved.
yeah, I'm the same. I've taken it twice, and I've talked to Dallas. Actually, I visited with Dallas yesterday. I've always got Dallas on speed dial. It seems like, because once you go to school, the questions become never ending. And I don't think Dallas realized what he was getting into.
Yeah,
A lot of phone calls. Yeah, and I would say quickly, I've got a set of corrals out in the desert, built probably in the 50s. They are shoddy at best. You can load a cow out of there, but we have loaded semi loads out of there. And places where it's broken or weather is finally torn down, whatever, we'll put up a panel. But generally, they're nothing fancy. And I'll tell you, it makes you a better stockman. You're not hustling anything around. You're really just moving slow and letting the animals uh, work off of where you're balancing them from. And I think there's a lot to be said for using what you have. And we now have built a better set of corrals at our home place out in the desert. I traded in a tractor that I couldn't never keep running. And the guy said, "Well, what kind of new tractor you want?" And I said, "Nah, I don't want a new tractor. I want to trade it in for continuous fence." And we had an oil field company deal with getting some free pipe. So we got free pipe and we traded in a tractor we couldn't keep running for continuous fence. And now we have a really nice set of pens. And that's like we talked about earlier. We were able to brand and load cattle out of them at the same time. And if you have enough people, you can do that. But I think taking advantage of opportunities like that, what's not making you money, a broken down tractor. And, I've got some free pipe. Perfect. Let's figure out how to make a better set of corrals here.
yeah, and
So
then beg, borrow, and steal as needed.
yeah, and we talked about that a little bit with before the show also is if you can work something out with your boss or if you're willing to help your neighbor and, on the weekend say, "Hey man, if you'd let me borrow your truck and trailer just to run my opens or whatever up to the sale barn, I'd sure be willing to help you all weekend, whatever you
Mhm.
need."
Yeah, you'd be surprised. We borrow from Maddox all the time. They have some working corrals and stuff for calves that you'd think that Wineglass would own, but man, if we could just borrow and I can take John out for lunch to pay him back, or Robert, I'm much happier to do that. And I'm the same way. I've got a nice trailer. We have the nicest portable corrals in the county, and I am always happy to loan those out to guys.
Boy, that's one thing Ladder Ranch does not have, and we talk about all the time, but we have a big enough crew here in portable panels that we just don't. And we've been able to get away with it. We bought a portable chute and unloading chute, which I don't know how we ever got away without owning one. We borrowed one for a long time, and then I bought one because I felt bad I was borrowing it so much from my neighbors that I went and bought one, and then it has panels on the side. So we'll load that thing up with panels, take it to branding or whatever we're doing, and we'll set that up. So we should get some, but we have enough labor that we can build our own corrals out of our portable panels. So we have not.
Yeah, yeah, you guys got plenty of help. It's kind of more of a four wheeler cowboy move to have the portables, because if you got an ATV, it just makes putting them up pretty easy.
Right. Low, no equipment. That's the other. And didn't you say something like buy a half mostly used four wheeler to start? Like you're going to have to be a little bit of a mechanic, but buy something that's not brand new and isn't going to depreciate right away.
Yeah, you want most of your balance sheet in growing assets, and that includes cattle.
Yeah. Tell me what you would do when you get that first calf check and, you're on top of the world, especially today.
Yeah.
What do you do with that calf check? Do you reinvest that in more cows? Or do you go, maybe it's enough to buy an apartment or something in town that you can rent out and start having some sort of cash flow? What do you think you should do with that?
That's a good question. I have owned cattle. I borrowed money to own cattle, and that has worked very well for me for a period of time. So but we certainly have to be coming close to some high here. We're 4 years in to this market, and at some point, investing in some other asset class is going to be very intelligent decision. I just don't know when that is. So I just couldn't say. What about you?
Having not done this and wishing I wish that we would have invested some assets into or switching money and moving it into a cash flow asset like having an apartment complex, which we did at a time, and my mom managed it, and she said selling it was the best day of her life because things are just, tenants suck, and it was like a 8 apartment complex, and
Mhm.
you're not dealing with one person, you're dealing with 8 people, and not most of them you don't know. So even though she didn't like doing it, she said it always made money. And
Did
to
it?
me, if it always makes money, I'm not quite sure why we sold it, but I took a load off my mom's plate. I know that.
Yeah, and it's tough to diversify, especially if you're focused on farming and ranching. Apartment management is not going to come easily to you, I don't think.
Yeah, and depends on how handy you are. Can you fix a broken water heater? Can you, deal with somebody's flooding or something like that? So I think those are all little things to bring in, but there's other things that you can invest that money in. Maybe you have a friend that has a car wash and they want to build onto it or something and they need some capital to do that, and you're now a business partner with them and you've got something that's flowing you in money that you don't have to do anything for. That guy's already there running that business. So I think it's important to look for those opportunities and not necessarily, and I take this from my friend Thane Russell, who was in my Ranching for Profit executive link group. And he said, when we were sitting in a meeting, he said, "Why is it every time a rancher gets money, all they want to do is go buy more assets that can die?" And I thought, I've never even thought of it like that, but that's so true. We're all so guilty of let's just buy more cows. Let's, buy more stuff instead of getting it into something that's going to bring you money back. And he was a really great board member for that.
Yeah, and I've sat at similar EO meetings, and I've heard this, that true profit in ranching only comes from money you have taken out of the business and put into stocks in the stock market. And some people have defined that as the only true profit. Like if you go and invest in more cows, you go invest it in a trailer or a truck, that's not truly profit. And I thought that was an interesting angle.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can agree with every bit of that. It feels that way.
Yeah. And one thing that I've been doing the last several years is investing in Schwab high dividend ETFs and setting the dividends to not reinvest so it hits our bank account at somewhat of a regular frequency as kind of mailbox money. And that's been a good thing.
Yeah, that's stuff that I wish they would have been teaching us rather than trying to get us into calculus or whatever at school. I wish they would have been teaching us how to do things like that. And I remember the first time I was sitting at a meeting with somebody and they were talking about their ETFs. I'm like, "What's an ETF? I don't even know what that means." And I've really enjoyed the podcast world for that reason. I have been listening to this podcast about Vanguard and how it got started, who started it, his life story,
Jack
and
Bogle, man.
Jack
Shout out to the
Bogle,
Bogleheads.
the brothers Bogle. And so anyway, I've really enjoyed reading about Vanguard. And then first thing I know is I'm standing there in Murdoch's the other day, and my investment guy calls me, and I said, "Hey, I want you to look up some of this stuff." And so I got myself into some Vanguard now. I'm pretty excited about it.
That's awesome. Yeah. I am a big Jack Boglehead follower. So I definitely follow the Boglehead deal. I do invest in some individual stocks and Bitcoin just for the thrill of it, but largely in ETFs, Jack style.
Yeah, what a what a genius that guy was way before his time. Nobody else even saw
Mm,
his vision of, basically making much less money but doing a lot more trades.
and good. And it was, yeah, when he launched it, it was to an audience of no one. And just slowly over time, it's the most popular investing model.
Right.
And he didn't get to see any of that, so it's kind of interesting. But he's definitely appreciated in today's investing world.
Yeah. So I guess to go back to this question of what would you do with some money when you get going, is one, you got to keep if ranching's what you want to do, then you've got to keep that growing and going. But if you have extra capital, don't be throwing it into going and buying some piece of equipment that you got through your first couple of years without. You're obviously doing it without it. Don't go get something just because it's going to make your life a little bit easier because you've got profit. And if you
I
start
mean,
investing,
but you need that $100,000 diesel pickup with the ranch hand grill guard so people know you're a rancher, aiming.
you look really cool though. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah. So I'm uh, I'm gonna go back to what I was saying, and that is you were doing it and you've got profit. Don't go buy $100,000 pickup and show everybody how cool you are. Keep doing what you're doing. Put it into the stock market because Logan and I obviously got off on a tangent there because we think that there's a lot more opportunity in making money doing your investing stuff than there is just putting it into your livestock. And like I said, make sure your operation's running because that's what got you the money in the first place. But don't go spend that on stuff you don't have to have.
Yes, and in particular, if you're getting into cow calf, the nice thing about the cow calf herds is that they multiply, and you kind of get to decide how to grow, when to grow, and it's a little bit like that compound interest deal with the stock market and all sorts of long-term scale where you accumulate money and wealth. Is that the earlier you get started and the quicker that you have that compound interest working in your favor, the better off your life is going to be. So get started early, accumulating assets that increase in value.
And spend money educating yourself, going to ranching for profit, going to soil schools, going to, maybe the best way for you to be breeding your animals is AI, and you go to an AI school and you can do that yourself. So I think reinvesting in yourself, that
Yeah,
is the other piece.
especially early on. So if we're talking about that 25-year-old farmer or rancher, man, the schooling opportunities are going to pay the best ROI.
Yeah, I know our ranch flipped a switch when we all went to ranching for profit. And we're giving a lot of shout out here to Dallas, but it has been a major game changer in my operation and in the way that we think and do things.
Yeah, and Same at Wineglass, and we will send our managers after 2 years of employee. We'll send them to Ranch for Profit, and I have yet to have an employee come back and say it wasn't one of the most amazing schooling experiences that they've ever had.
Yeah, I totally agree. I sent one employee one time, and then that person, we left on great terms, very cordially, but ranching didn't turn out to be the occupation for that particular employee that I sent, that I was hoping and trying to invest a little more money in. So, I would say Logan and I have had very different experiences with sending employees, and I'm not sure at what point I would send one of my guys to that, knowing that I'm struggling to come up with the words here, but it sent them in a direction. I think that they had some ideas. They wanted to do their own business stuff, and it kind of moved them away from wanting to work for me and
Mhm.
more into wanting to do their own thing, which was great for, them, and I would say kind of made a tough road for that person because they didn't realize how hard starting a business was.
Yes.
But they at least did have the tools for Ranching for Profit to start a business.
Yeah, and Dallas does a nice job at the school to be like, hey, you need whoever is paying for you to be here, you need to put on that hot hat that week. And and it makes it a little bit easier to send people knowing that he is like, hey, you probably want to be thinking about your own thing, but whoever brought you to the dance, you better be dancing with them.
Yeah, and it's not inexpensive. What is it, $2,700 or something to go to the school the
Yeah.
first time? And then I
Yeah.
think it's only like 500 to go back. So,
Yeah, you
def
can repeat it for pretty cheap.
as many times as you want.
Yeah.
And, even our guy we've shouted out to before, Burke Tykert, I think he told me he went like 6 times.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, "Burke, you're one of the smarter people I know. How did you not, pick up on what they were saying by, time number 5?" And he said, "There is so much good information in there. I wasn't getting it all. And every time I went, I kind of went with a specific thing that I wanted to really hone in on. And so I was probably missing some of the other stuff because I was really trying to get that one detail."
Yeah.
But in a week, and like Logan said, it's 5 days now, but in a week, there's a lot of information covered for
Yeah.
hours and
Yeah.
hours every day.
So invest in sharpening the saw to conclude, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And you've got a question here. What would you tell a 25-year-old version of yourself starting with a small herd today? And I'll use the example of Chandler. I got Chandler into investing, and I said, Chandler, every dollar you put in today is going to pay you tenfold by the time I said, you can work for me until you're 60 and retire a millionaire. I said, what general ranch hands guys can say that they're a millionaire at 60 years old? And there's not very many, because you got to go buy those new reins. You got to go, go to town and go to the bar or whatever it is. And Chandler's just not that kind of guy. And he understands that if he needs new reins, he's smart to ask me to go get them because he's using them on my horses. So, why should he have to go buy reins when my business should be buying those reins? So things like that. And I think employees need to find jobs that put themselves in a position that they're not having to buy every dang thing for the ranch.
Yeah. And I'd say echo pretty close to you. If you're 25, you don't know what you don't know yet. And the best way to learn is going to be on the job. You need to find someone to work under that you can learn from. And it'll take you 10 years to get where you really need to go. If you're 25, hopefully you have a few years you're into it, but you really need to work under someone that has something to teach you, would be my advice.
Yeah, find a great mentor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had several, and I think a Burke Tykert is one. I call him often enough that I hope he doesn't think it's annoying, but often enough that I can keep going back to the well for information. And same with several other guys we've mentioned on here. There's just a lot of guys out there, and older guys want to share their information. Most of them are not sitting there thinking, they're not sitting around thinking, how do I keep this information to myself and I'm never going to pass this on? They spend a lifetime acquiring that knowledge. And that's one thing the older generation seems to be great about, is that they don't want to hold that and keep it a young person from not knowing it. They want to help you. They want to tell you what to do, and maybe help you miss a few road bumps that they hit. So I would say absolutely go follow those older people and ask them the questions.
Yeah, I would agree. Mentorship is something I underutilized. Looking back, I should have been more intentional about that and establishing it.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the SOP side of it and what those do for you.
Sure. Well, just systems approaches, which is what they will teach you at Ranch for Profit. Holistic management is just systems approach to managing cattle, managing land, and managing your operation. I think is really the key.
Yeah, and those systems aren't necessarily just for your employees. If you're a one man show, those systems are for you as well.
Hmm. Yeah.
So if you can write those systems and then use them yourself, and if you need to go back and adjust those because you see that you can fine tune that for someday when you do have an employee, then that's all the better. That's what you're building it for. What infrastructure have you guys done, Logan, that really that this person should prioritize that paid off?
Water infrastructure is the one that offers ROI in our neck of the woods. If you're just getting started though and you're on rented ground, you're probably going to be running into some terrible water situations and there's not going to be a lot you can do about it. So that's a tough one. What advice would I give to me as a fifth generation operator versus, a first generation person looking to get launched into it? It's very different because I could, with confidence, go out and invest in that water infrastructure, knowing that it would pay a long term ROI. But if you're on rented ground that you don't know how long you're going to be on it, it's a little bit harder to give advice in that era.
Yeah, that's a good one. I invested in some water infrastructure that needed to be put in the 70s that when we purchased the ground, and it never has been put in because we always had enough snow or enough rain, and it kept those ponds full, and we're just in a drier cycle now that natural occurring pond isn't there, and we put in a significant amount of money this spring, but it paid for itself in the first year because I ran the numbers on what it would have cost to send those cows somewhere and have somebody else take care of them rather than me taking them. And it was cheaper the first year to do that than it was to like that's a 1 year payoff on a forever system.
Yeah, and if you have an analytical mind, you can see those opportunities and strike on them and be like, "Oh man, I bet I can get paid back in 1 year on this," and boom, you can execute it.
Yeah, and it was a little bit of a bite to take for sure, but I was going to have to take that bite sending those cows somewhere else anyways, so it was a no-brainer for me. And now I think doing pipelines and water infrastructure, pipelines and tanks is the best place a ranch can put their money, especially in these drier cycles we're seeing.
I agree, especially if you can get some help funding them.
Yeah, there's actually I'll give a little shout out to the FSA. They're doing a bunch of water well drilling stuff right now that people should be looking into because that stuff is doesn't come around every day because we've been trying to utilize those programs and right now there's some great opportunities to drill wells. I've got one I was talking to you about. It said, "What equipment do you regret owning, or are you glad you avoided?" And I go back to, and we were haying in a pretty big way, so we had to have the tractors to do that. But that was more of a the generation before me really liked to hay. We do not, so we've gotten away. Our tractors spend a lot of time sitting there, but they're paid for, so I don't feel like I can get rid of them because I don't want to have to replace them if I decide I do need them. But skid steer and backhoe, those are the two things that we use the most on this operation. Having flood irrigation and fixing ditches and things like that, we use the backhoe all the time. And then the skid steer, I don't even know how people ran before there were skid steers.
Well, you're going to love this because Wineglass does not own either a backhoe or a skid steer. Just very different. And we rent a skid steer for a few days every year, but by and large, we get along fine without one. I've been told by Maddoxes have one. I've been told by people, don't ever buy one because once you own one, you'd never go without.
Here I am.
Here you
I
are.
don't know. I don't know how we did it without. And we definitely had we'd use the tractor. We would just we use it a lot for loading and unloading pallets of mineral and things like that too, but we would do that with a tractor. We just use those pallet forks and do it on it with the tractor. But boy, we've done a lot of fencing jobs and upgraded our fences here, put in continuous fence, upgraded our corrals. And this wasn't done in a year. This is when I came home from college, we literally had corrals because when you have a ranch at 7,000 feet and a lot of snow, your corrals, just wooden corrals, don't last. So we have upgraded almost everything to metal now, and that has been a huge game changer. The amount of time we spend fixing stuff, I mean, it's just days back to the operation that we're not fixing things that if we would have just put it in pipe in the first place, then we wouldn't be spending a week rebuilding this thing. And so that's been a huge game changer for us. But I've been back at the ranch for like, I guess, 16 years now in this year. And we we're still redoing fences and pipelines and or pipe corrals and things like that. We didn't do it in 1 year. We've done the most important sections over many years. And I guess, Logan and I have been working together for what, like 12 years, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And so you've been back and forth to my place enough. You probably get to see the slow improvements.
Yeah, and I'll say in general, going back to that guy starting out early, it was very hard for me to figure out when to spend a dime on a ranch, in particular for overheads, on tractors, on skid steers, on corrals. And what I learned from my father and other people, and I didn't do this right at the beginning, you you put off buying something as long as you can, a tractor, a skid steer, new facilities. But when you do buy, you buy the nicest one available that can last the longest, the nicest corrals, and just buy the one that's actually going to last versus the cheap one that's going to fall apart in a couple years. And so in general, that's what I found to be true for my operation. Wait as long as you can to have to buy something, but when you do buy it, buy the nice one.
Yeah, I also use a specific ranch that I know of that has absolutely awful corrals and a really shoddy setup, and things don't look cleaned up in the background, and it just looks like a not professionally run ranch. And you watch it on the video sale, and then you watch, ranches that have everything in order, and where you video your calves is important. And what's going on in the background, what the feed looks like if you're doing it out in the country. But if you're doing it in your corrals, you want to do it in the most professional piece of corral you have and also have things cleaned up. You don't want a bunch of weeds in the corral. You don't want a bunch of trash in the background, things like that. And I will tell you, watching this specific ranch versus, many others, because most people have, I think, at least in this part of the world, most people have a pretty good setup. And I think that the professional look of your facilities has a lot to do with the prices you get. And that's not to say you can't have wooden corrals and have, a pretty basic setup, but just have everything looking professional all the time. And you will make more money by your place being cleaned up and looking good than you will from anything else.
Yeah, I would completely echo that. And that goes into employee morale as well. If the place looks polished, people are going to take pride in the work that they do versus a rundown, weeds growing everywhere. No, the grass is not mowed. And one of the other things I've been thinking a lot about is, when you first start out on a ranch and you're given like the lawn is something that you're in charge of. And I don't think a lot of those young people know that a well-maintained lawn is a stepping stone to like the cow boss job. I can look at I can say, hey, you're in charge of making this lawn look great to the owners and the customers that come visit. And I can watch how you maintain that lawn, and I will know how you will maintain the cow herd. They extrapolate very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% echo that. There's so much value. And if you go to Logan's place, it looks like he has somebody that comes once every 3 days and mows the lawn. And I don't know if he does or not, but the place is always kept up, and it's very impressive to see that. So I think, that's I'm trying to figure out how to say you don't have to spend a lot of money to look professional and be professional.
Yep. I agree with that. And that comes down to dress, that comes down to the lawn, that comes down to your pickup. A little bit of elbow grease goes a long ways.
Yeah. Well, Logan, let's get into I'll call it the big surprise because I was sure surprised when you told me about it. What are what are you going to do here on your 2 3 month periods that you're going to take this winter?
So my wife and family and I are going to take a sabbatical this winter. I've been back for 14 years and I need a little break. So we bought a camper and we're going to take it to Africa for 3 months in the fall and then 3 months in the winter. And we've done this before. My wife and I drove to Tierra del Fuego for our honeymoon over 15 months, lived in a rundown truck camper and a 10-year-old Toyota. It was a lot of fun. And then we went to Africa and did a very similar version of this trip in 2013. And I know you did post high school, kind of the same little southern and eastern loop.
Yeah, I did. It was actually my senior year, and this school I went to did a cultural immersion program basically, and we spent a month in South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, and we started in Cape Town and went all the way up to the northern part of Namibia, and then over to the Okavango Delta, and then dropped back down to Johannesburg and flew out. But we did that over a month, and it was absolutely one of the most amazing trips. I've talked to you about it 50 times because it
Yeah.
was such a I can't remember the word you used, but it was a major player in the way that my thinking happened for the rest of my life because
Transformative experience.
transformative experience. That's right. And I saw poverty that I'd never even knew it was out there when I was 18 years old. Watched the first person I'd ever seen die in front of me and he had AIDS. And these were, major transformative experiences for me in 1 month of my life that I've remembered for the rest of it. So I'm really excited for you. This is going to be cool.
Yeah, we're
And for your
excited.
girls.
Yeah, my girls are about to be 9 and 11. I think it's going to be just a outstanding experience for them. Perfect ages. We're kind of striking when the iron is hot here for a lot of reasons. And the number one question I get is I get a lot of shock when I tell people that. Unsurprisingly, I suppose. And one of there's one reason why I'm able to do this, and that's the team at Wineglass. So we've shrunk a little bit. We sold down on the cow herd, let go of some leases, and so we're a little bit smaller than we were the last several years, but we've maintained the same team here. So I have a wonderful team at Wineglass where operationally I'm really not needed outside of very busy days and the farm work, which obviously don't happen over those months. But, so TJ Ellicott, he's been with me this is his 7th year now as cow boss. He was really a foundational hire when he came in 2019. And at the time, Brandon Markert was working for me, and he was kind of my main man at the time. And after a few months of working with TJ, Brandon Markert came to me and he said, if you can keep TJ at this operation, I think he's going to be a game changer for your ranch. And truer words have never been spoken. And he was really a character hire too. And I've been able to build a really good team around him in particular. And then, Braden, who is right there with him. And one more thing on TJ, he shows up with an operational eyeball. So he manages the East Ranch as if it were his own. And I didn't train him that. I didn't teach him that. He just showed up with that because he has his own place. And he's a great guy. I need to stay out of his way. I'm going to Africa so these guys can run the ranch without me bugging them, honestly. And that is the darn truth. And then Braden is my long-term thinker, my strategic thinker. He's the one that we get together and think about what's happening down the road. And he's been just critical to kind of take over some of my own responsibilities of thinking way out 3 to 6 months, which is one of my main jobs. And he's really able to do that and keep things up to task. And he gets in the minutia too. So TJ and Braden make the best 1-2 punch team I could imagine. And so, like I said, I'm literally just getting in these guys' ways, and they're supported by, the staff that's been there 15, 7, and 8 years. So I've had a lot of retention when we've been shrinking, and I've really am able to step away because of the amazing team at Wineglass.
Right. And, what kind of systems, training, things like that did you do ahead of time to get yourself in the position that you can do this now?
Not a lot. So we'll be on corn stalks while I'm gone. We won't be weaning. We're going to run some pairs on corn stalks to simplify the fall work. And we talked about this last time with the SOPs. So Zane would be my most junior employee, and I think he's been here for 5 years. And when you have an experienced team like that, you just don't have a lot of the SOPs. I think it's gonna they'll be in fine hands, and that SOP binder that's in the office, I don't think will get dusted off hardly at all while I'm gone. So, for my particular team that I have right now, I don't think SOPs will be much of a tool for them to use while I'm gone. And I'll be talking to these guys multiple times a week, and I still am needed for the long term strategic thinking, a lot of the bookkeeping and just crafting the plan, which is something I can accomplish on the phone and far away.
Right. And it'll give you a whole new perspective on your place, not sitting in the middle of it, being thousands of miles away and being able to really take that 10,000-foot view of what's going on and what direction you want to head with your ranch.
That's exactly right. I get my best what be time done when I'm off the ranch. I have a lot of difficulty accomplishing what be work on the ranch, and we just executed a 10-year plan. It went very well, and it's time to kind of refocus. And when I come back, we'll go back into growth mode and strategically grow in the direction of cow calf. And yeah, I'm going to use it as an excuse to do some deep thinking, and that's what sabbaticals are for. Take a break, just take a breather a little bit. We just executed a wonderful plan, kept all the team on board, and I really need to take a couple steps away and figure out what the next 10 years at Wineglass look like for me and the crew.
When I was on the board of American Farmland Trust, we were hiring a new CEO, and we found the guy. He was the guy for the job. His name's John Piotti. He's a great guy, very systems thinking like you. And he, in his interview or when we started hiring him, he said, "Hey, I will do you guys the job that needs done here. But if I hit X, Y, and Z goals, then at year, I can't remember 5 or 10 or whatever it was, he said, I want to be able to take a sabbatical for, I think it was 3 months or 6 months." And he's big into sailing, I think. And they went on a big trip, him and his wife, in a sailboat. And so there's absolutely that piece of it is very important to these high earner jobs, high value jobs, is to be able to step away. And I noticed it because I was on the board when he took the sabbatical, and then I was on the board when he got off, and he came back with a whole new level of enthusiasm and energy. And I mean, just took American Farmland Trust like a rocket ship. And when he hit all the goals he said he'd hit, and did that because he had this, I want to be able to take the sabbatical. And then when he got back, he just took off and took the company in a whole nother level of greatness, I think. So it's very interesting to see how that worked. And it's really cool to see somebody in agriculture do that, because it's not normal in agriculture that you would do something like this.
No, it's definitely not normal. I've had a lot of shocked faces pointed at me in the last couple of months, but we're excited.
That's not what we do. That's not what we do here. This isn't
Yeah,
ranching.
I know. And to hit on that, there's no place I'd rather be than on Wineglass Ranch. Like ranch Whitby work is more addicting than crack. But I'm purposely stepping away for the family and for long-term thinking. It's strategic in nature.
Yeah, I'm afraid of the kind of ideas I would come up with, and my family I come up with a lot of big, crazy ideas almost daily. And I'm afraid if I had that kind of time, I would take myself in a direction that was not returnable.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting on a lot of branches out there too, which we did a little bit when we were there in 2013. But I have a brand new appreciation and understanding for grass management, genetics, and looking forward to meeting up with some of the African ranches and seeing how what they do can apply back to Nebraska, because I think there's a lot to learn from them and their management of that ecosystem.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit. We have some mutual friends that have been at both of our places and have some really nice operations out there. I think that'll be really cool for you to stop in and see guys like Campbell.
Yeah, yeah, and I will. I already hit up Campbell.
Yeah, he texted me this morning actually. So,
Nice.
Logan and I are frequently visiting with the other side of the world just to see what's going on and make sure we're not missing out on something.
And Campbell, I reached out to Campbell because I was like, hey, Campbell, I was in South Africa 10 years ago, and some people are saying it's more dangerous than it was. Give me a boots on the ground assessment. And he basically said in as many words, he's like, well, what do you mean? What have you done? And I told him that, we've done some overlanding and have traveled extensively. And he said, you're going to be fine. He essentially said it's the people who are afraid to drive around Omaha, Nebraska. They probably wouldn't be all right in South Africa. But like with you and your overland experience, I think you're good. But yeah, you look at a lot of the people from small town America, and yeah, it would be not a great environment for them. If you're afraid to drive in Omaha, you're probably scared of South Africa.
Yeah, that's for sure. If you can't handle Omaha, then you're probably not meant to leave the United States very far. Tell me a little bit more about this trip. What's going to be going on Wine Glass while you're gone?
Sure. So we'll be running on corn stalks, and what we'll do is we'll split it up into areas of responsibility. This is no different than any normal winter. Braden will manage half, TJ will manage the other half, and they're in charge of their groups. They're in charge of getting all their work done. I am a tap-in manager, so they are responsible for everything, and they tap me in or the staff in when they need help. And if I'm in their area of responsibility, I'm saying, hey, Braden, where do you want me today? So that's kind of my management style, which lends itself very well to not being the day-to-day shot caller, that needs his ego fed daily, that he's accomplishing things. So I'm already a step out of operations. For example, it's a Tuesday morning and you and I are recording this podcast at 8:18 in the morning, operationally not totally needed on a day-to-day basis. So I think those guys are going to do a wonderful job. And like I said, I'm just getting out of their hair so they can grow. I think it'd be a really awesome growth opportunity for Braden and TJ and the whole team.
Yeah, don't forget to tell people you're going to be having, I'm guessing Braden, who usually is who I'm sitting next to in the sale barn. If you're not there, you're going to be in the process of selling all these heifers we're breeding as well.
Yeah. We will be selling over 1,000 bred heifers this spring, and did it last year before, so kind of have a good idea of what that's going to be like. But yeah, we will be busy. We'll be doing stuff. It's not like we're just going into idle mode, but like I said, those guys, they've been here long enough. Time for them to take even more control, and me less.
Yeah, which just lends one more example of how operationally sound Wine Glass is, and I know you guys have specific dates you like to sell certain kinds of cattle, which not dates specifically, but months during the winter that some types of cattle tend to sell better than other months. So I think that's really cool that you guys have broken it down into, we want to sell this weight or this type this month, and that your guys know that. It's not something that you just have kind of in the back of your brain. And when they say, what do you want to load this week? And you tell them, and that's just something that's in your brain. Everyone on the crew knows what and why you're selling that group this week.
Yeah, we definitely have long-term planning and weight targets and dates for our yearlings.
Right.
Shall we pivot to the $1 billion farmer bailout?
You mean 11 billion?
11. What did I say?
1 billion. I'm like, oh,
No, it's 11.
Yeah, $11 billion. And so I sent Logan a text last night at like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And I said, Logan, I can't believe that corn is at, below $4. He said 350 here today. And I said we would all go broke in the cattle business if that happened to us. If we went from having, what are we in the fives for 5 weights now? If we went from $5 calves to 90 cents or something like that, it would break us. We wouldn't be able to sustain that and make it through the year, or we wouldn't have enough money to pay the truckers to get the calves, to the sale barn or anything like that. And Logan, I'm not a farmer, and I've said that many times. Why don't you tell us how this works and what $11 billion means to the grain farmers in the aid request?
Sure. So putting on my black hat, it's a pass through, those bailouts, they go to the farmers and then they end up in the hands of the ChemChina and John Deere and the equipment manufacturers. So black hat is, it's a temporary solution that, is just hitting the farmers' bank accounts for a couple months and then kind of carrying on. But we got into a discussion with Jeremy Martin and TJ and Braden and I and my dad yesterday. We were talking about why is Wineglass growing corn? Why are they growing wheat? Why are they growing grain crops and not just go all in on cover crops? Because we can do that really well and manage it really well. And the fact of the matter is that societally we have decided that we don't want a lot of grain farmers to go broke. And so when they are having rough times, there's a bailout pretty consistently. And so if you're growing grain and you're not making money, you can sort of expect these programs to come in and make you whole. And if we were to go whole hog on the cover crop, we would be outside of this entirely. We would be getting none of that bailout package. And when we do grow our cover crops, it does hurt us on these packages because we don't get the bailout money for those cover crop acres. It has to be program commodity crops. And so we can't afford to not grow some grains on our operation despite being able to really maximize that cover crop performance. It's these bailout packages that, you need to orient your operation towards if you are a farmer.
Yeah, and once again, I go back to the beef side, and we get some help, but it doesn't show up till a long time later, maybe 6 months, sometimes a year. And like when we had the winter of 2023 and we had all those losses from animals, and it was, catastrophic for us. And that money to help with any of that stuff didn't to replace the sheep we lost or anything like that. That didn't happen for like 6 months to a year or something. So a lot of bankers aren't going to sit with you that long. And so it's pretty interesting to watch this administration and how fast they're moving this money out to these guys as they're requesting it and seeing what's going on. So it seems like this administration is better about getting money out on the ground faster than other administrations.
Yeah, and that the cattle world is starting to get some of these payments, like with the Coronavirus Food Assistance Act. That was kind of the first major cattle bailout that we've seen, and it was after a century of the government saying we're in it with the grains, we're going to manipulate the market here, but we're just going to completely stay out of cattle. That seems to have changed post 2020.
Yeah, and I would say most cattle ranchers do not want to be in the position, and that's what NCBA says to people too, is, what we've heard from you as ranchers is you do not want the government in your business. And I think that's true to a degree, but when we have something catastrophic happen, and I would say that this drought is a catastrophic situation across the West, and when you start looking at the numbers of ranchers still out there on the ground, there's a catastrophic situation that we don't have enough young people coming in to replace the people going out. And that is, to me, catastrophic. And I think that the grain guys, and especially Chuck Grassley, have done a lot for the grain business over the years, where the cattle side wants to be a little more, leave us alone out here. We're fine without you.
Yeah, I think that's true. But the payments are coming nonetheless now. I think we're in a new era of a subsidy in the cattle market.
Yeah, it was actually nice. I was reading on X last night that Chuck Grassley did make a shout out to protect Caitlin Clark better in the WNBA, and it wasn't about getting more payments.
Man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I actually mentioned it to my wife whereas I was laying in bed reading it before bed, and I said, "Holy smokes, Chuck Grassley's talking about something other than Farmer Aid."
Yeah. Yeah,
But
Caitlin Clark's all up in my timeline, like unprovoked. I don't know why the world needs me to feel bad for this girl.
you take a fist to the neck, you're getting it all over.
I guess so. Wow.
I guess
Your
so.
timeline's tuned just like mine, I guess.
Yeah, well, tell me, I don't also understand all the pieces about the E15 push and what corn does there, and that's just not part of my world as much. So explain that also in this grain farmer stuff.
So the E15 would increase demand for corn. So the corn growers are very actively trying to get this passed. Very famously, the soybean farmers came out against it for reasons I have no idea. There's not, the corn and soybean growers are the same people, but anyway, it's a strange world out there. But they're trying to increase demand for their product, and yeah, that's all that it is to it. Just innate demand.
It seems like if they can make the corn cheap enough or the E15 cheap enough, and it's going to say, okay, oil, we don't, if you guys want to jack your prices up, that's fine, but we're going to keep E15 here. And seems to me like that's a great opportunity for Americans to say, yeah, let's push E15 because we don't want to be playing with these huge swings that the oil and gas industry throws through.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it stabilizes it a bit. And the other thing ethanol does is it creates less smog. And I don't know the science behind it, but yeah, it just creates less smog in areas like Denver and LA. It helps with that as well.
Yeah, so let's go back to small, young, new operators and talk about what you think they should be doing investing in crops versus cattle versus cover crops.
Oof, gosh, depends on your soil, your what you got. You could be small and nimble in the cattle market easier than you can in the farming and commodity side. So, owning a beef cow doesn't create a lot of quadrant one work. You can tend to have a full time job. So, scaling and getting started in the cattle industry, I think, is easier than the grain industry, where we have these huge machines and just the cost of capital entry is so high versus going and buying a trailer load of cows. You can kind of get started this week. So, what are your thoughts?
I think you're dead on there. I go back to a farm tour I did back in Indiana when I was on the board with American Farmland Trust, and we toured this place. And this guy had a very large farm, and he had one son that wanted to come home. And he said, "Well, we don't really have room for you on the farming side," which I was like, "How do you not have room for a guy on the farming side? You're 15,000 acres or whatever it was. It was some huge place." And his son said, "Well, I really am more interested in cattle anyways." And his dad said, "All right, well, let's figure out how we can do that." And so they got into that was the first place I saw alfalfa being grazed by cattle
Really?
and really kind of got the idea into my head that if we're going to intensively graze, we can do this. And did have all the farming equipment. So if it was too hot or something like that, and they deal with the rains a lot more than I do, then they would cut that down and dry it and then they would graze it.
Interesting.
Yeah, where I'm just grazing it right off the ground, and I have to really watch, dew and wind and different weather events. They could kind of, work around that a little bit, but they, were able to bring a kid home because of that, and then they're live pretty close to a city because they're in Indiana. They're always close to some sort of major metropolis, so they got into the direct to consumer stuff pretty big, and it appeared that they were doing very well with that. So, in this time when prices have been bad for these guys, I've always said thought that, those guys were smart because they're a diversified operation with cattle in the background, and those cows were probably paying some of the farming bills there for a while.
Yeah, that's no doubt
And
about
qu quite a few cows, like, I think they had maybe 500, which is a
it.
huge operation in India.
Yeah, yeah, that helps pay the bills in times like these.
Yeah. In fact, you start wondering if you how much you should be in that direct to consumer beef business in times like these.
Yeah, yeah,
And our friend, Davey Barron, him and I have talked about this, and it's, finding that balance of how to keep your customers and, you spend all this time and those are the people that took care of you when prices weren't as good. And how do you, make sure that you keep that business going while trying to maximize these other profits from the other side of the business now that are so good.
yeah.
So I think, why don't we talk just for a second about the grazing school you guys have coming up in Nebraska?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to the Nebraska Grazing Land Coalition. They've got two grazing schools coming up. I do want to highlight the one in Anselmo. It's at the McGinn Ranch. Matt McGinn, who is a board member and an outstanding grazer, is helping out with that. It's going to be on his place. Jim Garish, when he consulted with me here, told me that McGinn's have done the best job of adopting his practices of any ranch that he knows. And so it was really a highlight for him. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to sign up. You can sign up online, just Google it. And it's coming up here at the end of July. And I just wanted to just shout it out. It's one of those learning opportunities that you should jump on. But after that, what are your key takeaways from today, Eamon? And maybe what do you want to hit on next time?
I'll throw out there too. I was just thinking of this. We're going to do a field day here, and we're going to have a bunch of the people that have helped us through with our grazing with your heifers on these meadows on the intensive grazing. We've had University of Wyoming and Halter and several sponsors and people that have helped us along the way get through the callers and people that have helped pay for the callers. So we're going to have a field day with those guys and they're going to talk about what their goals are and why they are interested in helping with callers and things like that. And then we're going to have 25 people, first 25 to sign up, and they'll be able to do that through Ricketts Foundation. And they're going to do a shout out on Facebook here in the next few days. But I just thought I'd kind of shoot that out there saying, if you're interested in coming and seeing all the grazing we're doing with our halter collars, we're going to be excited to have people out. I think it's going to be either the 20th or 21st, but that'll be on the flyer when it comes out. So
Perfect.
yeah. So on the wrap ups, takeaways today, I think small operators this is a great time for a small operator. If you can get into an animal that is going to make you money and not cost you money.
Mm.
And there's a lot of ways to figure that out, but make sure you're buying the right type of animal in today's market because they're so expensive. And you don't have to, this is one thing we didn't talk about, is you don't have to own them.
Mhm.
Just, like what I'm doing with you, I don't own the cattle that I'm running for you all summer. And then like you do for me, you don't own the cows that you're running on corn stalks all winter. You've got
Correct.
your own stuff, but you're also supplementing and using your guys, giving them enough to do to pay their salaries all winter by bringing in other cattle.
Yeah. Think a lot about capital allocation.
Yeah. One thing I highlight here is strong teams and systems buy freedom and consistency.
Yeah. And I'm cashing that check.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, I think there's just a lot of important decisions to be made, and your time spent in the house working on the business issues is just as important as the amount of time you spend out with a shovel in your hands or whatever you're doing for your day to day.
Yep, I agree. You need to take time to think and plan.
Yeah, and if you can figure out how to get away for a weekend with the wife and maybe it should be a date, but us ranchers have trouble with that. So if you guys can talk about 10,000-foot things while you're gone, I think those are the times like what Logan's going to do. Those are the kind of things that really get you on the
Move
next
the
level.
needle. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Let's we got more.
I think just to kind of recap, we talked about the grain farmers, and I think I learned a lot there from you not being a farmer and corrals, infrastructure, equipment, no equipment, labor costs. All those things are things to be keeping your finger on and just watching your costs all the time. So, and I think that's in general, who says it? I want to have a war on costs
Burke.
all the time. Burke
Yep.
Tyker.
Yep.
So yeah, go ahead and let's put a bow on this, Logan.
Yeah. Well, Eamon, as always, a pleasure. Keep running on grass.
Thank you.
Adios.
Luego.